The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor as my world imploded. I stared at the cracked screen, the message still visible. Nora, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but David's been lying. He hasn't been working for months. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone, reading the text from Benjamin again. David's brother had always been the black sheep of the family, but he'd never lied to me. Unlike my husband, apparently. Nora? Everything okay in there? David's voice called from the living room, concern lacing his words. I swallowed hard, willing my voice not to shake. Fine. Just dropped my phone. Lies. More lies. How long had this been going on? I took a deep breath, smoothing my shirt and plastering on a smile before walking into the living room. David lounged on the couch, feet propped up on the coffee table, a beer in hand. The sight of him so relaxed, while I'd been working overtime to keep us afloat, made my blood boil. Hey, honey, he said, flashing that charming grin that used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made me sick. Want to order in tonight? I'm thinking Chinese. I perched on the arm of the chair across from him, studying his face. Actually, I was thinking we could talk about your job search. Any promising leads? David's smile faltered for a moment before he recovered. Oh, you know how it is. The market's tough right now, but I've got a few irons in the fire. Really? I pressed, my voice sharper than intended. Because Benjamin seems to think you haven't been looking at all. The color drained from David's face. You talked to Ben? Nora, you know he's always trying to stir up trouble. Don't. I held up a hand, cutting him off. Just don't lie to me anymore, David. How long have you been unemployed? He set down his beer, running a hand through his hair. It's not what you think. How? Long. David sighed, shoulders slumping. 3 months. The room spun. That 3 months of lies, of watching me struggle to make ends meet while he sat at home. 3 months of his mother, Michelle, criticizing my inability to take care of her son properly. Why? I whispered, fighting back tears. Why would you do this to us? I didn't mean for it to go on this long, David said, leaning forward. I lost my job and I was ashamed. I thought I'd find something quickly, but then what? I snapped. You decided it was easier to let me carry the burden while you played video games all day? David flinched. That's not fair. I've been depressed, Nora. You know how hard it's been for me. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize your depression gave you the right to lie to your wife for months on end. The doorbell rang, startling us both. David stood, reaching for his wallet. That'll be Mom. I invited her over for dinner. My jaw dropped. You what? I thought it might cheer us up, he said weakly. You know how she loves to cook. David, so help me God if you open that door. But it was too late. Michelle bustled in, arms laden with grocery bags. There's my boy, she cooed, kissing David's cheek before turning her critical gaze on me. Nora, dear, you look awful. Have you been getting enough sleep? I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to scream. Michelle, now's not a good time. Nonsense, she interrupted, heading for the kitchen. I'm making David's favorite pot roast. Lord knows the poor boy needs some proper nutrition. As Michelle prattled on about her son's favorite foods, I locked eyes with David. The guilt in his gaze confirmed everything. He'd been lying about more than just his job. I can't do this, I whispered, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. Nora, wait. David called after me, but I was already gone, slamming the door behind me. As I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, I realized this was just the beginning. The life I thought I knew was unraveling, and I had no idea how to stop it. I stormed into the teacher's lounge, slamming my lunch bag onto the table. My colleagues looked up, startled, but quickly returned to their conversations. All except for Sarah, my closest friend at work. Rough morning? She asked, sliding into the chair next to me. I laughed bitterly. You have no idea. David's mother is coming over for dinner tonight. Sarah winced. Michelle, I thought you banned her after the Christmas disaster. I did, I sighed, picking at my salad. But apparently, my husband has decided that my feelings don't matter anymore. Before Sarah could respond, my phone buzzed. Michelle's name flashed across the screen, and I groaned. Speak of the devil, I muttered, answering the call. Hello, Michelle. Nora, dear. Her saccharine voice dripped through the speaker. I was just calling to make sure you remembered to pick up David's dry cleaning. You know how he likes his shirts pressed just so. I gritted my teeth. Michelle, David can pick up his own dry cleaning. I'm at work. Oh, that's right, she clucked. I forget you insist on working. It must be so difficult for David not having a proper homemaker for a wife. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the phone. I have to go, Michelle. I'll see you at dinner. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with rage. Sarah touched my arm. Nora, you okay? No, I whispered. I'm really not. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. As I pulled into our driveway that evening, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. The smell of roasting meat hit me as soon as I opened the front door. There you are, Michelle called from the kitchen. I was beginning to worry you'd forgotten about us. I found her at the stove, stirring a pot while David set the table. He gave me a sheepish smile, which I ignored. How thoughtful of you to start dinner, Michelle, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm sure David appreciates having his mommy take care of him. Michelle turned, her eyes narrowing. Well, someone has to, dear. Lord knows you're too busy with your little job to properly care for my son. My little job? I sputtered. You mean the one that's been paying all our bills for the past 3 months? David's head snapped up. Nora, please. No, David. I cut him off. I'm done pretending everything's fine. Your mother needs to know the truth. Michelle looked between us, confusion etched on her face. What truth? David, what is she talking about? I laughed humorlessly. Go ahead, David. Tell your mother how you've been lying about having a job. Tell her how you've let me struggle to keep us afloat while you sit around all day. The color drained from Michelle's face. Is this true, David? David hung his head. Mom, I can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can, I snapped. Just like you can explain why you keep spending money we don't have on fancy dinners with your mother. Michelle gasped. David, you told me those dinners were business meetings. They were, David protested weakly. Sort of. I was networking. I shook my head in disbelief. Networking? Is that what you call drinking expensive wine and complaining about your horrible wife? Michelle bristled. Now, see here, Nora. I won't have you speaking to my son that way. If you were a better wife, perhaps he wouldn't be in this situation. Something inside me snapped. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Excuse me, Michelle sputtered. I said, get out, I shouted, pointing at the door. Both of you. I can't do this anymore. David reached for me. Nora, please, let's talk about this. I jerked away from his touch. There's nothing left to say, David. I want you and your mother out of this house. Now. As they gathered their things, Michelle muttering about ungrateful daughters-in-law, I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in months I allowed myself to cry. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to see a text from Benjamin. How'd it go? Did you confront him? I took a shaky breath, typing out my response. It's over, Ben. I kicked them both out. His reply came quickly. Good, you deserve better, Nora. Both of you do. Both of us? What did he mean by that? As I stared at the cryptic message, a horrible suspicion began to form in my mind. There was more to this story than I realized, and I was determined to uncover the truth. I stared at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands, the 2 pink lines mocking me. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not with everything falling apart around me. A knock at the bathroom door made me jump. Nora, you okay in there? David's voice called out, concern lacing his words. I quickly shoved the test into my pocket. Fine. I called back, my voice higher than usual. Just a minute. I splashed water on my face, trying to compose myself before facing my husband. When I opened the door, David was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. You've been in there for 20 minutes, he said softly. What's going on? I brushed past him, heading for the kitchen. Nothing. I'm fine. David followed, his brow furrowed. Nora, please, talk to me. I know things have been tense lately, but I whirled around, anger suddenly bubbling up. Tense? That's what you call this? You've been lying to me for months, David. Your mother treats me like dirt, and now... I trailed off, my hand unconsciously moving to my stomach. David's eyes widened. Now what? Nora, are you... I nodded, tears spilling over. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. David stumbled backward, sinking into a chair. But how? I mean, we've been trying for so long. I know, I whispered. Believe me, I know. David reached for my hand, but I pulled away. This is wonderful news, isn't it? He asked, his voice uncertain. I laughed bitterly. Is it? We can barely afford to feed ourselves, David. How are we supposed to raise a child? I'll get a job, he said quickly. I promise. Nora, I'll start looking today. I shook my head. You've been saying that for months. Why should I believe you now? Before David could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Benjamin. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on 5th? I grabbed my keys. I have to go. David stood, reaching for me. Nora, wait, we need to discuss this. There's nothing to discuss, I snapped. You lied to me, David, for months, and now I don't know if I can trust anything you say. I stormed out, leaving David calling after me. 20 minutes later, I slid into a booth across from Benjamin. His face was grim. What's going on, Ben? I asked, my stomach churning. What did you mean when you said both of us deserve better? Benjamin sighed, running a hand through his hair. Nora, there's something you need to know about David and Michelle. My blood ran cold. What about them? Benjamin hesitated. They've been embezzling money from the family business. That's why David lost his job. He wasn't fired. He quit before he could be caught. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. That's not possible. David wouldn't. He did, Benjamin said softly, and Michelle's been helping him cover it up. That's where all the money for those fancy dinners has been coming from. Tears stung my eyes. Why are you telling me this? Benjamin reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Because you deserve to know the truth, and because I can't stand by and watch them destroy you anymore. I pulled my hand away, suddenly feeling suffocated. I have to go. I can't process this right now. As I stood to leave, Benjamin called out, Nora, wait, there's more. I turned back, dreading what he might say next. Michelle's been pressuring David to leave you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She thinks you're holding him back, and David, he's been considering it. The world tilted on its axis. I stumbled out of the coffee shop, gasping for air. My phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from David asking where I was, if I was okay. But all I could think about was the life growing inside me, and the web of lies that surrounded us. How could I bring a child into this mess? As I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, I made a decision. It was time to take control of my life, with or without David. And the first step was facing the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom watching David adjust his tie in the mirror. The sight of him dressing up made my stomach churn. Another networking dinner? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. David's eyes met mine in the reflection. Nora, please, not now. Then when, David? I snapped, stepping into the room. When are we going to talk about the fact that you're spending money we don't have on fancy dinners while I'm working overtime to keep us afloat? He turned to face me, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. I told you, these dinners are important. I'm making connections, trying to find a new job. I laughed bitterly. Right? And I suppose your mother's presence at every single one of these networking events is just a coincidence? David's jaw clenched. Mom knows people. She's helping me. Helping you what? Spend our savings? I pulled out my phone, pulling up our bank statement. Look at this, David. Look at what you've spent in the last month alone. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the list of charges. Expensive restaurants, high-end clothing stores, even a spa day, all while I'd been buying generic brands and skipping lunch to save money. I didn't realize, he mumbled. Didn't realize. I snatched the phone back. How could you not realize? We're barely making ends meet, and you're living it up with your mother like nothing's wrong. David ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. You don't understand. She's been helping me through this. She understands what I'm going through. And I don't? I felt tears stinging my eyes. I'm your wife, David. I'm the one who's supposed to be supporting you, not your mother. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. It's different with Mom. She doesn't judge me. The words hit me like a slap. And I do? Is that what you think? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me. I have to go. Mom's waiting. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed his phone, ignoring his protests, and dialed Michelle's number. David, darling, where are you? Her saccharine voice answered. The maitre d' is getting impatient. He's not coming, Michelle, I said, my voice ice cold. There was a pause. Nora, what's the meaning of this? The meaning is that your son is unemployed. We're drowning in debt, and you're enabling his reckless behavior, I spat. No more fancy dinners, no more shopping sprees. It stops now. I hung up before she could respond, tossing the phone back to a stunned David. Nora, he whispered, what have you done? What you should have done months ago, I replied. I'm taking control of our finances, starting now. David's face darkened. You had no right to do that. Mom was just trying to help. Help? I laughed incredulously. David, open your eyes. She's not helping, she's destroying us. He shook his head, grabbing his keys. I can't deal with this right now. I'm leaving. As he stormed out, I called after him. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. The slam of the front door was his only response. I sank onto the bed, my hand unconsciously moving to my still flat stomach. The baby. In all the chaos, I'd almost forgotten. My phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. How are you holding up? Have you told David about the embezzlement yet? I stared at the message, my mind reeling. The embezzlement, the baby, David's betrayal. It was all too much. With shaking hands, I dialed a number I never thought I'd need to use. Amelia and Albert Cohen's residence, my mother's warm voice answered. Mom, I choked out, tears finally spilling over. I need help. There was a pause, then her voice filled with concern. Nora, sweetheart, what's wrong? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. Everything, Mom. Everything's wrong. Can I come home? As I waited for her response, I knew one thing for certain. My life was about to change dramatically, and there was no going back. I stared at the final notice in my hands, the bold red letters screaming, "Past due," across the top. Our electricity was about to be cut off, and David's unemployment benefits had just run out. The walls of our once cozy home seemed to close in around me. David! I called out, my voice sharp with panic. We need to talk, now. He shuffled into the living room, eyes bloodshot from another late night of networking with his mother. What is it, Nora? I'm not feeling great. I thrust the notice at him. This is what it is, David. We're about to lose power because you can't be bothered to look for a real job. He blinked at the paper, then shrugged. Mom will help us out. She always does. No, I said, snatching the notice back. No more handouts from Michelle. You need to find a job, David, today. He scoffed, flopping onto the couch. It's not that easy, Nora. The job market is tough right now. The job market is always tough for people who don't bother looking, I snapped. I've been carrying us for months, David. Months. And now with the baby coming. The baby, he interrupted, sitting up straighter. That's right. Maybe we should reconsider. I froze, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. Reconsider what? David couldn't meet my eyes. Well, you know, given our financial situation, maybe now isn't the best time for a baby. The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? He shrugged, still not looking at me. It's just something to think about. Mom agrees that. Your mother knows. I cut him off, my voice rising. You told your mother about our baby before we even decided what we're doing? David finally looked up, his expression defensive. She's family, Nora. She has a right to know. I'm your wife, I shouted, tears stinging my eyes. This is our decision, not hers. Just then my phone buzzed, a text from Benjamin. Nora, we need to talk. It's about the company finances. David's in deeper than you know. I looked from the phone to my husband, who was now pacing the room, muttering about how I never understood him. In that moment, something inside me hardened. David, I said, my voice eerily calm, I need you to tell me the truth. Right now. What really happened with your job? He stopped pacing, his face paling. What do you mean? I mean, I said, stepping closer, that I know about the embezzlement. I know you weren't fired. You quit before you could be caught. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How did you? It doesn't matter, I cut him off. What matters is that you've been lying to me, about everything, and now you want me to give up our baby because you can't face the consequences of your actions? He reached for me, his eyes pleading. Nora, please, you don't understand. Mom and I, we had a plan. We were going to fix everything. I jerked away from his touch. Fix it how, David? By spending money we don't have? By lying to me at every turn? I did it for us, he shouted, his composure finally cracking. For our future. I laughed bitterly. Our future? There is no hour anymore, David. Not after this. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. David called after me. Where are you going? I turned back, my hand on the doorknob. To see your brother, and then to a lawyer. This marriage is over, David. As I slammed the door behind me, I heard David's anguished cry. But for the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead would be hard, but I knew what I had to do. For myself and for my baby, I had to break free from David's web of lies, no matter the cost. I stumbled through the front door, exhausted from another long day of teaching. The house was eerily quiet, and a sense of dread washed over me. Something was off. "David?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. As I rounded the corner into the living room, I froze. There, sitting on our couch like she owned the place, was Michelle, and beside her, looking sheepish, was David. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice tight with suspicion. David stood, wringing his hands. "Nora, honey, we need to talk," Michelle chimed in, her saccharine voice grating on my nerves. "It's about Harold, dear. He's passed away." I blinked, trying to process the information. "David's father dead?" I'm so sorry," I managed to say. "When did this happen?" "2 days ago," David replied, not meeting my eyes. "The funeral's tomorrow." My mind reeled. 2 days. Why was I just hearing about this now? Before I could voice my confusion, Michelle spoke again. "The thing is, dear," she said, her eyes glinting with something that made my skin crawl, "I can't bear the thought of living alone in that big house. So, David and I have decided... We've decided that Mom should come live with us." David finished, his words hitting me like a physical blow. The room spun. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "You..." "What?" David stepped towards me, his hands outstretched. "It's just temporary, Nora, until Mom gets back on her feet." I jerked away from him, anger bubbling up inside me. "And when exactly? Were you planning on discussing this with me?" Michelle tittered, a sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, Nora, don't be dramatic. It's already decided. I'll be moving in tomorrow after the funeral." Something inside me snapped. "Like hell you will," I snarled, rounding on David. "How dare you make this decision without me? This is my home, too." David's face hardened. "Mom needs us, Nora. I thought you'd understand that." "Understand?" I laughed bitterly. "Understand what, David? That you've once again put your mother's needs above our marriage, above our child?" Michelle gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Child? David, you didn't tell me?" "Because it's none of your business," I shouted, beyond caring about propriety. "Just like it's none of your business where you live. You are not moving in here, Michelle." End of discussion. David grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Nora, that's enough. Mom's staying, and that's final." I wrenched my arm free, fury coursing through me. "No, David, what's final is this marriage. I'm done." The room fell silent. Michelle's mouth hung open in shock, while David stared at me, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. "You don't mean that," he whispered. "I do," I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I'm tired of being second best, David. I'm tired of your lies, your manipulations, and your complete disregard for my feelings." I turned to Michelle, who was now smirking triumphantly. "And you," I spat, "you can have him. You've always wanted to be the most important woman in his life. Congratulations, you've won." With that, I stormed out of the room, heading straight for our bedroom. I could hear David calling after me, but I ignored him as I began throwing clothes into a suitcase. As I zipped up the bag, David appeared in the doorway. "Nora, please," he begged. "Don't do this. We can work it out." I shouldered past him, pausing only to slip off my wedding ring. I placed it on the dresser, the soft clink seeming to echo in the tense silence. "There's nothing left to work out, David," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's over." As I walked out the front door, I could hear Michelle consoling David, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't worry, darling. She'll come to her senses." But as I climbed into my car, tears finally spilling down my cheeks, I knew there was no going back. The life I had known was over, and it was time to face an uncertain future. Alone, but finally free. My hands shook as I gripped the manila envelope containing the divorce papers. After weeks of agonizing and late-night consultations with my lawyer, it was finally time. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door of what used to be my home. David answered, his eyes widening at the sight of me. "Nora, what are you doing here?" I thrust the envelope at him. "It's over, David. I want a divorce." He stared at the papers, his face paling. "You can't be serious. Nora, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've given you chance after chance. I'm done." Michelle's voice called from inside. "David, Who's at the door? I tensed as she appeared behind him, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. Oh, it's you. Come to beg for forgiveness, have you? Actually, I said, meeting her gaze, I've come to serve your son with divorce papers. Michelle's gasp of outrage was almost comical. David, you can't let her do this, after everything we've done for her? I laughed bitterly. Everything you've done for me? You mean lying, manipulating, and destroying our marriage? David finally found his voice. Nora, you're not thinking clearly. What about the baby? The baby will be better off without your toxic influence, I snapped. I'm filing for full custody. Michelle lunged forward, her face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little. David held her back. Mom, please, let me handle this. I took a step back, my hand instinctively moving to protect my stomach. There's nothing to handle, David. It's over. Sign the papers. He shook his head, his expression hardening. No, I won't let you destroy our family over a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I felt my anger rising. You lied about your job, embezzled money, and chose your mother over me at every turn. That's not a misunderstanding, David. That's a pattern of betrayal. Michelle scoffed. Oh, please. You're overreacting. David was just trying to protect you. Protect me? I rounded on her. By lying? By stealing? By undermining our marriage at every opportunity. David reached for me, his eyes pleading. Nora, please. I love you. We can work this out. I jerked away from his touch. No, David, we can't. I don't trust you anymore, and I certainly don't trust her. Michelle's face turned an alarming shade of red. How dare you, after everything I've done for this family? You've done nothing but tear us apart, I shouted, years of pent-up frustration finally boiling over. You've manipulated David, belittled me, and now you're living in my house like you own it. Well, guess what? It's over. I'm done with both of you. David's expression darkened. If that's how you feel, then fine. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. I'll fight you every step of the way. I felt a chill run down my spine, his words. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else entirely. Someone cold, manipulative, and dangerous. Do your worst, I said, my voice low and steady. But remember, I know everything. About the embezzlement, about your lies. Are you sure you want to drag this out in court? David's face paled, and I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Good. He should be afraid. I turned to leave, but Michelle's voice stopped me. You'll regret this, Nora. No one walks away from this family unscathed. I looked back at them. David, shell-shocked and angry, Michelle, triumphant and smug. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right decision. Goodbye, David, I said softly. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the next steps. As I walked away, I heard the door slam behind me. My hands were shaking, and tears stung my eyes, but I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. I climbed into my car, one hand resting on my stomach. It's just you and me now, little one, I whispered. But we're going to be okay. I promise. As I drove away from my old life, I knew the battle was far from over. But I was ready to fight. For myself, for my baby, and for the future we deserved. My phone buzzed incessantly, a barrage of texts from David flooding the screen. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew would be our final conversation. We need to talk, I typed, my fingers trembling. His response was immediate. Come home. We can work this out. I laughed bitterly. Home. That place hadn't felt like home in a long time. There's nothing to work out, David. It's over. Sign the papers. A long pause, then. You're making a mistake. Think about our baby. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach. I am thinking about our baby. That's why I'm doing this. Nora, please. Mom and I, we can change. We'll do better. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. It's too late for that. You've made your choice, David. You chose your mother over me, over our family. I won't let you do that to our child. Another pause, longer this time. Then, if that's how you feel, fine. But don't expect me to give up without a fight. I'll see you in court. His words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to back down. Do your worst, David. I'm not afraid of you anymore. With that, I blocked his number, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was done. Now I just had to wait for the papers to be signed. Weeks passed in a blur of lawyer meetings and prenatal appointments. I threw myself into preparing for the baby, finding solace in the simple act of creating a new life, both for myself and for the child growing inside me. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, my lawyer called. It's done, Nora. David signed the papers. You're officially divorced. I sank onto the couch, overwhelmed by a mix of relief and sadness. It was over. Really, truly over. As if on cue, my phone rang again. This time it was Benjamin. Nora, I thought you should know. David and Mom, they're not doing well. I tensed. What do you mean? Benjamin sighed. The embezzlement finally caught up with them. David's facing criminal charges and Mom, well, let's just say she's not handling it well. A part of me felt vindicated, but another part ached for the man I once loved. I'm sorry to hear that, Ben. But I can't get involved. I know, he said softly. I just wanted you to know that you made the right choice. You deserve better than what they put you through. After we hung up, I sat in silence, rubbing my swollen belly. We're going to be okay, I whispered to my unborn child. I promise. Months passed and life settled into a new rhythm. I welcomed my daughter Lily into the world, surrounded by the love and support of my parents and true friends. As I rocked Lily one evening, a knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find a familiar face. Mark, an old friend from college. Nora, he said, smiling warmly. I heard about everything. I just wanted to check on you, see if you needed anything. In that moment, looking at his kind eyes and genuine smile, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost. Hope. Actually, I said, returning his smile, I could use some help assembling this crib. If you're up for it? Mark's grin widened. I'd be honored. As we worked together, laughing and sharing stories, I realized that this was what I'd been missing all along. Genuine connection, mutual respect, and the freedom to be myself. Years later, as I watched Lily play in the backyard of our new home, Mark's arm around my waist, I marveled at how far we'd come. The pain of my past with David and Michelle had faded, replaced by the joy of a life truly lived on my own terms. You okay? Mark asked, noticing my contemplative mood. I smiled, leaning into his embrace. More than okay. I'm happy. Really, truly happy. And as Lily ran towards us, her laughter echoing in the air, I knew that every struggle, every tear, had been worth it. This was the life I was meant to live, surrounded by love, free from manipulation and lies, and filled with the simple joys of family and self-respect. I had survived the storm and emerged stronger for it. And now, with my daughter in my arms and a partner who truly valued me by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever the future might hold.